Good evening, everyone. When I was a child, I was really fond of stories about pirates and about the adventures of sea explorers. So, from a curiously early age, from a weirdly early age, that's an easier word, I was aware of a condition called scurvy. However, I hadn't really thought about scurvy in much detail in many, many years until I came across an article called This Sick England on a French magazine. In quite a surprised tone, this article explained that scurvy had made a comeback. However, before we get into what the article said, let's give you some context in case you're not that familiar with the condition. So, scurvy is a disease caused by a prolonged deficiency of vitamin C. It was first described in the 15th century, the so-called golden era of sea exploration, and it was particularly common among sailors. Sailors used to go on really long voyages, maybe months, even years at sea. Obviously, their ships had no fridges, so it was very hard to keep food fresh, to preserve fresh food. Everything they ate, therefore, was either salted or smoked or anything they could get their hands on while at sea, like seal meat or fish. If you notice, there's something clearly lacking in this diet, which is fresh fruit and vegetables, which, as you no doubt know, are the best source of vitamin C. Vitamin C is necessary for the synthesis of a protein called collagen, which you probably know from all those beauty cream ads, collagen to fight your wrinkles and to have a smooth, beautiful skin. However, collagen is necessary for many other things, and vitamin C is therefore necessary and critical for us to have healthy bones, healthy skin, healthy tissues, and blood vessels. The symptoms that sailors with scurvy usually presented with include ulcers, blackened skin, really kind of papery skin, very, very dry and kind of crumbly, gum disease, a rotten, horrible breath, and teeth decay as well. Scurvy was such a serious condition at the time that more men died of scurvy, more sailors, let's say, not men in general. So let me rephrase that. More sailors died of scurvy while at sea than in battles, during mutinies, and because of piracy combined. So scurvy was really one of the main causes of death while on board. It wasn't rare for a crew of 200 people, for example, to go on a 2-year voyage and have 130 men die during that voyage. So 130 out of 200 could easily die of scurvy. Thankfully, a solution was eventually found. The cause of the condition was unknown for a very long time. And in fact, vitamin C wasn't discovered until 1912. So, that's quite recently, not quite within our lifetime, but, close enough. In the grand scheme of things, of course. However, even though they didn't know that scurvy was caused by a deficiency in vitamin C because they didn't know what vitamin C was, they realized that sailors got better from all those symptoms. Their skin got better, their teeth, their gums, when they came to port and they could have fresh vegetables such as celery or cabbage. Once this was observed, ships started carrying things like dried fruit or sauerkraut, which are, fruit and veg, even though they're in a form that's easier to transport on a long voyage. By the time 1752 came around, Dr. James Lind, a Scottish doctor, had discovered that citrus juice was a very fast cure for scurvy. It very quickly could revert many of the symptoms that sailors suffered from. And by 1795, all members of the Royal Navy who were at sea, the British Royal Navy, of course, received a daily portion of lemon juice. Probably not very tasty, but it literally saved their life. Gradually, once the condition was better studied and these solutions were found, the problem gradually faded and it stopped being a real concern. It hasn't been a real concern for about 200 years until now, when it again is a real concern. So this brings me back to the article that I was telling you about, This Sick England. The gist of the article is that scurvy is making a surprising comeback. The article, as you might guess from the headline, is about the UK. So that's what I will mostly be discussing today. But the UK is not the only country that's in this situation, just to be clear. So between April 2013 and April 2014, so in a year, there were 94 hospital admissions caused by scurvy. More recently, between 2020 and 2021, there were 171 registered cases of scurvy in the United Kingdom. The symptoms included constant fatigue, muscle and joint pain, bleeding or swollen gums, and thinning hair, among other possible symptoms. This growing trend of scurvy and scurvy coming back and so on is quite similar to what's happening with other, let's say, anachronistic conditions that we thought were gone forever and that are making a comeback. Measles is coming back because of the anti-vaccine movement, and other conditions such as gout, which you might be familiar with from stories about medieval kings who only ate lots of meat at those feasts that they had and then died of gout. That gout is coming back as well. And in 2014, it was estimated that 1 in 40 Britons had gout. Who would have thought, right? As I was saying, this comeback of scurvy is also happening in other developed countries. That's kind of the shocking part, that it's happening in developed countries where we waste so much food. We have access to so much, and yet we waste so much. If you're curious, I tried to find some information about Spain, since that's where we are based, at least virtually. But I only found some information about 2 cases of scurvy that happened in 2017. But anyway, back to the UK, because that's what the article is about, and that's what I actually have information about. So, as you know from the first part of the speech, scurvy is caused by a prolonged lack in vitamin C, which comes from fresh produce like fruit and vegetables. Therefore, there are some social groups which are particularly vulnerable to scurvy. We're talking low-income families. We're talking people who struggle with drug or alcohol addiction. People with some specific mental conditions who, for example, cannot really take very good care of themselves and perhaps lack the support to do so. For example, I read about a case of a man who, for a very, very long time, ate only bread and butter because he had a mental condition and he got scurvy as a consequence. And the final group that's vulnerable to scurvy is people who go on restrictive and uncontrolled diets. So they cut some foods out of their diet for no medical reason. If you want an example of that, there was a very sad case of a newborn baby who got scurvy because their parents decided not to breastfeed him anymore and feed him only almond milk, which does not contain enough vitamin C for a baby to grow healthy, and the baby got scurvy. But anyway, those 3 groups that I mentioned last, so drug or alcohol addiction, mental illness, and restrictive diets, are not the main groups. The main group is low-income families. unsurprisingly. The single biggest predictor for scurvy is income. According to a 2012 study in the UK, fruit and vegetable consumption is very tightly connected to household income. And this is particularly so in the UK, where there's a very high level of inequality and produce is quite expensive. In Spain, we're quite lucky in that fresh fruit and vegetables are quite affordable. So in this 2012 study, 45 families were interviewed, and it was found that in 8 of those families, children never ate fruit and vegetables or ate them less than once a week. This obviously put them at risk of scurvy because you don't need that much fresh fruit and veg to stay healthy or not to get scurvy at least. As little as 1 orange a week can be enough to prevent scurvy. However, 1 orange. If you've lived in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure this is true of many other countries, 1 orange can easily cost, what, 50 pence? While a whole frozen meal is £1 in Iceland or one of those supermarkets. So you can see that it's not as straightforward as just have an orange every week. Low-income people are often criticized and blamed for their poor health by saying they just don't make the healthy choices. You know, they go to the same supermarkets as we do, but they buy the frozen meals and I buy asparagus. They might not be making the healthiest choices, but they're making the logical choices. If £1 is going to buy you one full, filling, high energy meal, possibly the only full meal you're going to have all day, or 2 oranges, what do you think you're going to spend that £1 on? Obviously, we cannot underplay the role of knowledge or the lack of knowledge, basically, as a factor. Some people definitely are not aware of what a balanced diet is or how to cook products so they are at their healthiest when they eat them. For example, if you overcook your vegetables, you might not as well not have them because you're just killing, in inverted commas, all the vitamin C that they contain. So there isn't much point. They will not protect you against scurvy. Therefore, education is definitely a part of the solution to scurvy and the solution to malnutrition, the solution to obesity, and other food-related diseases in developed countries. However, it's not just about education, is it? The number one solution is, as in so many things in life, economic. In the UK and elsewhere, austerity measures, among other factors, have led inequality to shoot up to unthinkable and frankly shameful levels. People have been pushed to use food banks, which don't really have the resources to store fresh produce either. The government has left citizen welfare in the hands of charities and celebrities. Some of you might remember the is it Manchester City or Manchester United? I never remember. But a Manchester footballer called Marcus Rashford had a fight with the British government last year during the pandemic about free school meals for underprivileged children. And there was also a famous chef, Jamie Oliver, who launched a campaign to improve school meals. So that's the kind of thing, that the kind of campaign or the kind of agents that people depend on rather than government support, because benefits have been capped and austerity has been applied. So over time in this crisis, the poor have become even poorer and there are more poor people than before. So the problem has become more serious and harder to fix. But I wanted to tell you this story, not because of, my childhood love of pirates and, the sad story about them dying of scurvy, not just the pirate, the good guys as well. I wanted to tell you about this because it's an example of how things go wrong, things that are not supposed to go wrong because we have them figured out, right? I think it shows that poverty is not just about a lack of opportunity, the lack of the possibility of having a good life, a life where you can do what you want, flourish in what you want. Poverty is often a matter of life and death, or at least of good health or disease, even in the most developed societies. Thank you.